Hello and welcome to my video presentation on Egyptian mythology, in which I'll be discussing Bastet. Bastet was one of the many different goddesses of the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Originally, however, I had planned on creating a presentation on the entire Egyptian pantheon, but the more I read into it, the more I realized just how vast the pantheon of ancient Egypt is, and determined it would be an easier feat to create a family tree to the song I'm My Own Grandpa than to attempt a video on every single god and goddess in Egypt at once. Jokes aside, the first thing to note about Bastet is that she has two different stories as to her origins, or what I'm going to choose to believe are two different stories about her origins, because that makes it more interesting. One story states that Bastet was closely linked to Sekhmet, the Egyptian warrior goddess and goddess of healing. Sekhmet was a bloodthirsty deity and violent, but was over time tamed and became a gentle cat goddess. How one tames a god or goddess is beyond my understanding, but then again, so is most of mythology. Another version of the story claims that Bastet and Sekhmet were sisters, and Ra's daughters. The story presented here that I find more believable would be the story claiming Bastet and Sekhmet were sisters, as the idea that a god or goddess can be tamed seems far too outlandish to be believed, even in terms of mythology and its general area of study to begin with. Bastet was a goddess of many different aspects of the Egyptian society. Bastet was first and foremost a protective goddess associated with cats. She also, over time, gained and presumably, like so many other deities in the pantheon, lost aspects of her divinity, such as the goddess of cosmetics, the goddess of love, goddess of the home, goddess of woman, goddess of secrets, and goddess of sex. Apparently that's what they think about when they see cats in Egypt, but who am I to judge? The reason behind there being a goddess of cats is due to the fact that cats kept many forms of vermin from entering into Egyptian homes and consuming the food therein. Oof. Cats also were able to scare off or even kill dangerous snakes, which led to them being revered as holy creatures, much like cows are in India today. Causing harm to a cat was considered a crime, or maybe it was considered heresy, maybe it was both. Either way, it was usually punished with death, which is appropriate because cats are the best. The fact that cats were considered holy and protected the home from vermin and snakes most likely led to people of ancient Egypt believing that a form of divine being was watching over them through the medium of cats. Thus the goddess Bastet became a deity. These aspects were primarily, as you would guess, cats and protection. It is thanks to worshippers of Bastet that claimed that, while in some form of danger or another, such as a house fire, their cat had climbed into the home to help save them, died in the attempt, and then supposedly, as a blessing of Bastet, rose again from the dead, that we have the saying today that a cat has 9 lives. Bastet was a very long-lived goddess, being worshipped from as early as 2890 BC all the way to the 1st century AD, as Christianity began to rise and eclipse polytheism or multi-god religions. Ironically enough, it seems gods can die, when introduced to Christianity at least. The goddess Bastet was worshipped primarily from the ancient Egyptian city of Bastet, which is in modern times called Tel Basta. The city is located in the Nile Delta, north of Cairo, and was the center for the cult of Bastet. An ancient Greek historian by the name Herodotus describes the temple of Bastet in the city of Bubastis as being on an island with water surrounding it on 3 of its 4 sides. The temple is described as being overshadowed by trees. The temple itself was located in the center of the city, not as the tallest building, but with the city built up around it so that Egyptian citizens could gaze into the temple from without its walls. Speaking of walls, the temple had a stone wall carven with figures surrounding the temple. Within the walls, Herodotus writes that there was a grove of very tall trees, which surrounded a great shrine wherein lies the graven image of the goddess Bastet herself. Eras later, during excavation of said temple, over 300,000 mummified cats, that's a lot of dead cats, were discovered, Since cats held roughly the same spot in ancient Egypt as cows do in India today, The death of a family's cat would leave said family in great mourning, and those families that would, or that could rather, would have their beloved furry companions mummified or embalmed at the temple of Bastet, or in cemeteries specially set aside for cats. And with the origins of Bastet covered, the aspects associated with the goddess of cats delved into, and the location of her most important temple and center of her cult addressed, this is about all the information I was able to find on the goddess Bastet. Bastet was one of the most interesting goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon, in my opinion, and was just as interesting to study about and write about as she was generally just to know about. Bastet was just one of many, many, many different Egyptian deities, however, and she and her sister Sekhmet are not even the first feline deities in Egyptian history. That title belongs proudly to Mafdet. But I won't get into that, because attempting to find where all these rather similar gods and goddesses of an incredibly incestuous nature came from and who was first is like trying to untangle the Christmas lights in a dark room during an earthquake. You can do it, but good luck.